So another issue that's very relevant today when it comes to people's identity is what's just called intersectionality. People often refer to it as identity politics, which is that people are starting to say we need to look at the groups that people fit into, their gender, their racial ethnicity, their class, and that has to play a role in the extent to which society should try to, I suppose, help them, because people who are straight white males, for example, are the most privileged. I've always struggled with this concept because...
As a straight white male.
As a straight white male, exactly. I've struggled with this concept.
Why don't we just discuss this ourselves?
Yeah, because I'm at the bottom of the rung, yeah. No, but I've struggled with it because, I'm sure I see plenty of tramps on the street who are straight white males, and I don't think they're particularly privileged. But I just wondered, I feel like there is something legitimate to say that, okay, a certain group in general has struggled, therefore... therefore what? I don't know. Does that mean, then you have the questions of affirmative action, all these issues, and I've struggled with this hierarchy of privilege thing, but I just wondered what your take was on it.
It's so difficult. It's difficult because wherever you lie, you feel accused, or you feel there's somebody bullying you. If you're in the groups that want to belong in the intersectionality pool, let's say, you feel there's been bullying, whether it's overt, covert, conscious, subconscious, structural, and if you've as you put in the white male population, you typically feel, or some will feel that, hey, this is just a way of bullying us. We're not exactly females outperforming us at all sorts of levels and so forth.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of natural place of grievance. I don't know the answer because I haven't lived inside the space of every single, it would be great if we could suddenly take a journey and live in different mindsets and live in different cultures and live in different places and feel really what it's like to be there. So it's an interesting question. Also questions of how collective. It's interesting because a counterweight to general liberal worldview, which is the individual sacrosanct. Suddenly you're getting a sense of, well, if my ancestors were persecuted, it's probably affecting the way things still are right now. If there was an imbalance of power back then, and in the case of gender, in the case of men and women, it's not even an issue of ancestry. We all had exactly the same amount of male and female ancestors. But if there was structures and them and us's and people fit into those categories, then it's the categories themselves that are responsible for some kind of reparation or some kind of rejigging, which is interesting because it goes back to something we discussed earlier of how this overemphasis on the individual, it's false. Forget the fact that it's whether it's better or worse, it's just not the way humans are. So that's interesting. I do know in Torah, we've often, we began the story as a persecuted group in Egypt. And yet, for Egyptian converts, and the Torah is an explicit, you can't keep pushing them off because you have to remember you have gratitude for the fact that you were strangers in their land and they looked after, what do you mean they looked after? They enslaved us, but they fed you, So it's a very interesting perspective. And I think in general, the Torah doesn't like living in a world of perceiving yourself as a victim. Now, that doesn't mean the other society should perceive, okay, we did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think built into Jewish national consciousness, sort of almost a consciousness, is this sense of when you do struggle and you are at the bottom, look for the opportunity to move up and do. Now, I say that doesn't necessarily mean that all other groups have the same privilege, same opportunity to do so. There could be unique strands of Jewish history. But wherever we are, self-pity is not a healthy place to come from. And I think people love being in a world of self-pity. We love being the victims. So as we joke, today the white male will say, hey, we're the victims. But so I think self-pity is not a healthy place to come from.
Do you think, is it legitimate to say, because of my group, I am at a disadvantage?
That may be true. It may be true. It may well be true. There's certain glaring examples where you look at it and you think, this has been tried and this has been tried and this has been tried, and it's still a heavy underclass, and there's got to be something structurally wrong. There's got to be some way of breaking it. I think it's less the question of, I think the question itself might be wrong, and I think that's what people get into very aggressive posturing over. The deeper question is, I don't think it's an unhealthy thing to say that let's take in America, but it's true in Europe as well. It typically ends up being that black populations are underprivileged. Let's start with that example. Yeah. People might be afraid to use those words because it could immediately prompt some kind of racism. But almost any metric you look at, if you take any American social problem, take gun crime. People want to say, America should ban guns. Maybe they should, right? Let's change the Constitution. Maybe they should. Let's forget that debate here. Why? Because gun crime in America dwarfs the gun crime in the Western world. It's true. What's interesting is homicide rates are already much closer, and white homicide rates and black homicide rates are almost on parity with where they are in the rest of the world. Because 99% of gun crime in America is one individual take a pistol and shoot you. In Europe, you just take a knife and machete and kill the person. They're not that different. Again, I'm not getting into the gun crime debate and this horrifying scenes of mass murders in schools and automatic weapons. I'm not going near that space. But you suddenly realize you're dealing with a black-white problem. Or healthcare. Why does America rank 30th in the world? So, okay, you could say universal coverage, not. But in the end, why does America have such a high infant mortality rate, which in the end brings down its life expectancy rate lower than Britain, when actually for almost all illnesses, it has a much better rate. A person has cancer in England or America, they've got a much greater chance of recovering. Same with almost all illnesses, even including the population that's not insured in America, which is another whole major disaster, whatever. But so why isn't America's life expectancy higher than Europe? Because of high infant mortality rate in the black world. Oh my goodness, that's also a black-white issue. And wherever you turn, you're dealing with a group of clearly self-identifiable people who are wallowing in what appears to be some kind of trap at the bottom. How do you crack that issue? That should be a massive priority for any country that's got that problem. We have it in Europe as well, just we have smaller populations, so we don't wrestle with it in the same way, we kind of turn a blind eye. That's a real issue. I think people are afraid of it because it's so obvious it will give voice to racism and voice to distinction and so on. So, forget...
You're saying just dealing with the issue.
You've got to deal with that issue. That's a real issue. Now, do we then bolt onto all sorts of other populations? Not maybe yes or maybe no. It depends if the problems are the same or they're different. It depends how perceived they are versus how real they are. You can't deny that's a real problem. Now, you can say it's because of racism of the whites, or you could say nothing to do with the racism of the whites. But you can't deal with the fact that there is a problem. You could say it's because they were racist 200 or 300 years ago, they were enslaved. Who knows what it is? It's something. You've got to deal with it. You can't turn... And when you feel like you're turning a blind eye, some of that community is going to say, look, you've left us trapped in the bottom. The world's working very well for you, but it isn't working very well for me. Now then does somebody else latch on and say, I don't like Western values, I don't like the current way of thinking, I should also be in the aggrieved pool, and we should... That might already be, but I do think we have to deal with the reality that however we want to talk about post-racial world, even if, and it may be true that the white population is very not racist on average in America, that may be true, but you're left with a problem. What are you going to do about it? I don't know the solution, but it should be a massive national priority. Whatever it is, So someone will say reparations. Maybe. But your objective should be, how can we all come together and create a situation where in 100 years' time, there will be, everyone will grow up, right, where you genuinely, skin color has zero or almost indiscernibly small impact on where you're going to end up in life. That's a real issue. Is it blame this population, blame that, fight that, these are bad guys, these are good guys? That I think is, no, I think that's probably not the right way forward. Trying to blame somebody because they've got a white skin color, because a lot of white people say, well, I'm not racist, I would employ everyone exactly equally and treat them exactly the same. That's not the issue. Leave that aside, but we have a real issue here. Where are politicians standing up and talking about it? And it is a scary topic to address. It is going to invite racism. It is, and you could make a case if we can solve it quietly and find proxy solutions. I often think, should they find those, because there are these problems with the criminal justice system. Again, we're now going way off Judaism here into American stuff, but in the criminal justice system, it's well known there are certain crimes which seem to have a disproportionate amount of blacks end up in jail than whites. If they're drug-related crimes and there's no other offence, could they do some kind of mass, what's the word when they my brain's gone dead here. The word when they release them, when they... the president gets the pardon, or whatever it's called, whatever it is.
Whatever it's called.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Will that help? So okay, we've moved on to another topic, but we've moved on to a different area, and I hope nothing I say is offensive in any way, but I think that's a classical example where the intersectionality is like kind of this tribal warfare, but there is a real problem underlying it over there, irrelevant of the tribal warfare.
Yeah, but the specific issue of how you resolve
when you get, for example, on an American campus that, okay, this population feel aggrieved by the way America is, and we feel aggrieved, and and therefore the state of Israel is also evil because of white. Okay, then you're going to nonsense.
Yeah.
Then you're crossing over into a very much opportunistic. Let's gather you people who are struggling on the bottom and make you as angry as we. We're angry about another issue.
Yeah.
We'll try and tell you that that we should all blame. In other words, when it's about tell you this is perhaps after all that waffle.
Yeah.
Here's I think where the important distinction lies. Where it's about who I can blame. That's self-pity and resentment. That's such an unhealthy place for anyone to be.
And is there no place in Torah? Is there no place for that? You know,
when
we
it's
think about the Jews leaving
in
Egypt.
Torah, we usually, if we blame anybody, we blame ourselves. The temple's destroyed. So should we become anti-Babylonian, anti-Roman? No, we should look inside ourselves and say, because we had baseless hatred, God let his temple be destroyed. What are you talking about? It's Romans who destroyed it. We're not anti-Roman.
That requires a belief in God.
Maybe it does. Maybe it does. But the point is that blame. Look at Joseph is sold into slavery, right? He could sit there wallowing in self-pity, resentment. These things are deeply unhealthy places to come from. There's a problem that needs a solution, is a very deeply healthy place to come from. And I want you to be my partner in helping fix it, because it will be better for me and better for you. And we as a population, as we rise, will have so much to give you as well.
Yeah.
That is a healthy place to come from.
But in terms of that solution, you're saying it's better to be a place, come from a place of how can we maximize opportunity for people,
well,
rather
look,
than...
in history, look, you will see, one of the things that's very inspiring about the Martin Luther King and the movement and the people, it didn't feel, or maybe I'm just looking at, sometimes you look back at documentaries and miss what's going on at the time, yeah. But what I've seen, it doesn't feel like it was essentially about resentment and hate.
No, it wasn't.
It felt essentially like it's about, this is wrong, this is right, let's march
Same with
together.
Mandela, for example, yeah.
Well, I think the earlier Mandela was about that, which is why I think
earlier,
the later Mandela, I think when that sense came across, the white population were able to say, okay, it's not about who's worse, it's about we got a problem. Our ancestors created. Let's solve it together. I think that's typically what happens where it's more. I think it's typically where it's more effective. And intersectionality feels to me, whatever its merits, maybe there are some, that it's so much about who we can blame together.
So it's actually potentially it's not inherently a
problem.
I think
let's go for the theory. The word intersectionality means we might look at a world and say, let's say some oppressive group is able to divide and conquer, so let us oppressed people come together to fight for our rights. I think maybe unfairly, I think most of us, maybe because we're white males, would look around and go, that's such a bad reading of the world. There's really no one oppressing you, and you're just trying to blame.
Or suffering is governed by so many other metrics.
Whichever. Now, are we right or wrong? That's why it would be so nice to be able to walk into people's worldview, but it feels like it's so badly misguided.
Yeah.
And maybe because we're sensitive to the way it's manipulated to become an anti-Israel agenda and all this other stuff. Yeah. Maybe we're particularly sensitive, and maybe because whenever groups get together to battle other groups over power, historically they've gone and wiped out Jews in the middle. You think of the Khmelnytsky massacres, where suddenly underclasses en masse rose up against the overlord class and busily wiped out Jews in the middle. Yeah. So I think we also feel an old historical sense of smell that smells something's a bit dirty over here. This is going to come and become a war against the Jews as well, or the Jewish state is usually the proxy for it right now. So I think that's something which I might myself, and perhaps you might be a little allergic to, and our nose on these things. Perhaps occasionally Jews we can veer onto paranoia, but it's usually not bad. We've usually been trained historically to pick up on this, and it's hard to not feel it's also there. Certain groups are being manipulated for the sake of a deeper agenda, which might be hostility to Israel, which might actually be the least oppressed groups who are manipulating
What's quite interesting, actually, is where Jews fit in on the intersectionality thing, because they're probably quite high up.
What, in terms of modern-day privilege? And
in terms of privilege,
yes. Would have been the other way around, maybe. But I don't think that these sorts of... In other words, it
feels a bit silly.
But that's what I'm saying. When we get into this issue, there's so many issues. Because there really are legitimate grievances. And there really are.
Of course.
And again, part of the challenge is, it's a bit like, I sometimes think some people look at the Jews and do they moan too much about anti-Semitism, right? And we might look at other groups, did they moan too much about, racism? And again, I think it's not a matter of anti-Semitism. I think we have to look at what's the issue, what's the right, what's the wrong. But so it's complicated. It's not straightforward. There are groups that have the current structure genuinely doesn't work for them. And the solutions that have been tried might have gained some progress, but not others. And that's real. That's got to be a burning problem that we've got to all think and not sleep at night over. Then there's other groups that might really be struggle to really call them oppressed, who often have a broader political agenda that's often outside the country they happen to be in, where they don't like the political views of that country because it violates their global vision of the world. And those groups may then manipulate the other suffering groups and march against the state of Israel or something like that. And that's something which we would acutely be sensitive to, and again, sometimes perhaps oversensitive. And that's why a lot of this. You'll always get backlashes. The minute it's identity, the minute it becomes a power struggle, we want to push you down to raise ourselves up. The minute it becomes that, you're going to get major backlashes, and you get, all sorts of, again, tribal politics.
And what actually comes to mind is how the Torah is very clear about not favouring the poor or the rich when it comes to
justice.
Yeah, and that we shouldn't. That when it comes to justice, everyone should be treated equally before the law. Yeah,
that's because the Torah is in the middle of polemic against favouring the rich. It also says you don't favour the poor. It's true. It's all true. And I think we've veered quite off Jewish topics a bit, if you want to use this video footage or not. But
no, I think there's certainly Torah concepts that override these discussions.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button, and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.